Hello, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Social media is tough enough for individuals and major B2C brands, but if you're in the B2B technology space, then it's a different game. Then how do you drive measurable growth in B2B social media, and how does your content on those channels ultimately drive growth for your brand? Are you measuring the right things? How do you go about building a community for B2B that ultimately needs to help customers solve problems? Jerry Moran is the global head of social media strategy at Cognizant, and he's a B2B influencer with a career of helping people and technology brands increase their awareness and improve their bottom line with social media, digital, and content marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss B2B social media marketing, channels, measurement, demand gen in the funnel, building community, influencers, internal and external, and a lot more. So let's tune into a B2B social expert with a shark who loves to be social on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your career to date. How does a computer science and finance graduate like you go towards marketing?
Thanks for having me, Shark. It's a pleasure to be here. And my experience over the past 30, 35 years or so has really spread across some iconic brands. I've worked for Kodak, for Ralston Purina, for HBO, for IKEA, for SAP, and for Cognizant. And those degrees that I had back 35, 40 years ago were really an attempt to understand the marketing process. And I've always, ever since I was a kid, funny enough, I always wanted to be a marketing consultant. And here I am, 58 years old or so, and here I am being a marketing consultant. And I tried to take all of those courses and degrees and really package it up in a way that, hey, to make great marketing decisions, you have to really focus on metrics. You have to make good financial decisions. Mm-hmm. It is about ROI. And that sort of background really has helped me out to where I have been to where I am today.
Yeah, and I wanted to be Batman or a fireman, and I'm just, saddened to hear that you wanted to be a marketing consultant when you grew up. So obviously I haven't grown up yet, so that ought to tell you something else today. But, like everything else in marketing today, it seems like the content we produce is under intense scrutiny on how it should perform with an ROI. So as a B2B marketer, especially now that you are today, especially in the industry you're in tech, you're part of a pretty long sales cycle. How do you go about developing that content marketing strategy and story to support that long sales cycle? And then how do you sustain it in order to get funding for it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Shark. So I have a saying that you have to tell people that you're selling fruit before you put grapes on sale. And if it's in a way, it's looking at the funnel that way, where it's really a numbers game. So if enough people know that you are selling fruit, it will make that smaller part of actually putting grapes on sale much more successful. So it's looking at the buying process, not so much the selling process, but the buying process, the buyer's journey, and figuring out how do you get in front of the people with impressions? How do you touch your community? How do you engage them with the right content to really put you on the radar to say, hey, I deserve to be in this space as a tech marketer or as a B2B marketer? And then ultimately, how do I drive consideration by getting me to go to the next step in that demand gen process? So it's being able to tell that story of a bigger community, drive engagement to start a conversation, and then drive consideration by getting people to go to the website, and showing how each part of that process, that gear, works to tell that bigger story that really drives that ROI and makes that end process, whether it's ABM, whether it's demand generation, work a little bit harder. The more I can tell the story to the bigger audience in a very engaging way, the more this demand gen and actually closing the sale, that will be more successful. And if we can tell the story that way, connect the dots with the metrics, then you're in business from actually driving results and then getting budget to do whatever you need to do.
Well, a lot of times I speak at conferences and I complain about how so often people have a channel strategy. But how do you look at really your channels for leveraging growth? I mean, obviously, we know what content with blogs and the website we'll do. We know what, LinkedIn is obviously, thank goodness for especially B2B marketers. But Beyond that, where do you sort of look at the other channels that help drive a lot of your growth?
The key I have found, the success I've had with a couple tech companies I've worked with, is having a clear role and responsibility for each channel. It's like I've coached my girls when they were growing up in softball and in basketball, and every player on the team had a role and responsibility. You put them in a spot where one, they were going to be very successful, but two, it was also a stretch goal. So each channel has to do more than one thing, but each channel is going to be able to deliver a certain amount of a certain amount of results and play a certain role. So it's taking that step back and saying, okay, LinkedIn, this is the job I want you to do. Here's the expectations. Here's what we're going to have. This is how we're going to roll out with the channel. Blogs. This is the role that you have. This is what you're going to do. Email, the same thing. So it's accurately defining those roles and responsibilities, setting up the KPIs, and then measuring the goals along the way, and taking a look at each channel to say, all right, based on performance, based on the goal and the performance, is this actually the right channel to do the right thing? Or do I need to feed the channel with different content? Or do I need to mix the channels up and have a different expectation for each one to deliver the results that I'm looking for?
Well, another thing that I've seen emerge over the last, say, 5 years as we've experienced such huge growth in all the different social channels, and I'm sure you've probably seen this as well. You've worked for massively large companies over your career. How do you see a best practice with when channels are utilized, either centralized or dispersed amongst different people? Because I'm sure you run into this all the time, where different people in a company that has 100 plus thousand, they're probably going to want to all have an opinion on how you take social channels. I've seen it with small companies, I've seen it with large, but you can't make everybody happy with the kind of content, especially if you centralize that. But how do you go about doing it?
Right. So we find success. I find success, and winning teams find success. I believe is having the ability to focus and set a goal. And some would call it a persona. Someone would call it being able to tell a story. But it's having a good read of the field to say, here's the story that we need to tell. So here's the goal. Here's the story. Here's the voice. Here's the tone. So that helps us understand what it is we have to do, and then the story that will help us do what we need to do. And then really setting up a strict set of really a box. So it's really then creating the box of the rules of engagement, the tone, the voice, the goal. Here's a story that we want to tell. So inside the box, we can be very creative. And it's really being able to simply tell a story and understand from the customer's perspective what they want to hear. All stuff that is content marketing 101, but it really comes down to a set of process and procedure that, for instance, if I am a marketer and I want to tell my story, I'm an expert in my market, in my particular market or industry or practice, but I'm not necessarily an expert in telling the story. So laying out the steps of here's the things you need to think about to tell the story, so you can pass it off to the content creator, and the content creator can then think through, all right, here's the story, here's the voice, here's the goal of what we're trying to do, here's how to wrap that message in a way that uh, actually helps that marketer achieve a goal. Now, having a centralized way of approaching this, whether it's with an in-house agency, in-house writers, a centralized way that you run a particular channel, that centralization gives you a lot of control, and control in a good way. Well, where you're scorecarding briefs that come in, you're scorecarding the content requests that come in, just to make sure you're basically the person leading the orchestra, and you're making sure that
Sure.
everyone is singing off the same songbook. Otherwise, it's sort of an instance where, yeah, if you don't have that person, it's almost like you're playing the songs from the same album, but everyone's dancing to different songs off the same album, and it just doesn't look pretty.
No, completely agree. And I think, 99% of the time the people have the right intentions, but then they start delineating the message without understanding truly how the consumer reads that message of the brand, and you don't have a million chances to screw that up just because somebody else has good intentions with telling a different story.
Yeah, I think every company has a lot of passion, and a lot of
Yeah,
marketers have a lot of
exactly.
passion, and I think that passion is great. Inside the company, outside the company, no one really cares about the passion.
Exactly.
People really people really care about the story, and someone or group has to step up to say, hey, this is the best way to tell your story. There are multiple ways, and this, based on performance, based on history, based on what we're trying to do. Um, this is the best way to help you tell your story, and that seems to work.
Well, for social media for everybody seems to, at least with engagement, has been falling off a cliff, but especially in B2B. How do you create innovative social content for, large tech companies and large B2B companies that really is interesting and makes people want to react to it?
You do a lot of reading, you do a lot of paying attention outside the brand. You have a set of aspirational brands that are within, let's say, B2B. You have a set of aspirational brands that are outside of B2B. You pay attention to the metrics, you pay attention, really, what I mean metrics, secondary research. So
Sure.
what's trending, what's not, what do people love about TikTok, what are people not liking about YouTube, and then how do you then map that to native behavior? Native behavior is going to change every quarter, 6 months, or
Hmm.
year. So how do you create this stuff that will catch attention, and help you tell your story? I mean, there's three things you want to do with your content and your ideas. You want to grab attention to really stop me in my feet, because there is a cacophony of content that are out there. You want to teach and enable and show people that, hey, here's something that may help with your problem, and then you want to drive the consideration to get people to click through. The fact that engagement is down, I just think people just don't share or like as much anymore. It's not like, oh, there's something I should like, oh, there's something I could share. Very few people are going to share. You do get some shares, but sharing as a statistic is going down over the last
Exactly.
5 or 6 years. What you can't look under the hood with most brands are clicks up, and are you earning the right for to get people to click through? Sharing is one thing, sharing is a very public thing, but clicking through to understand something, that's another thing. And the more focus to that individual's needs, that's where the personalization comes in. You're going to get people to click through. The eye candy, motion graphics,
Yeah.
animations,
Yeah.
combining animations with video, that's just trying to stay ahead of the curve. Live video, which live video is it? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? What's the best way to pull this off? Is it stop motion? Is it not stop motion? It's constant testing. And what anybody should be doing is testing two or three things every week. Test it on a weekend, test it at night. what
Amen.
what plays out better, what's going to grab my attention? And it's still the wild west. If everyone was best practice, then everyone would be mediocre, because
Exactly.
everyone would be doing the same thing. So uh, experiment, and that's what really has worked for me.
Well, your company now has millions of followers on social channels. You've worked with a lot of brands that have millions of followers on their social channels as well. In general, over your career, what kind of metrics have you really, wanted to study and measure and attribute on social channels? What are the things beyond, just the click through or the likes and shares that you look at in general to measure out your campaigns?
I think the biggest challenge, and the thing that really is very interesting to me, is the idea of mixed media modeling,
Sure.
which isn't brand new. But can you imagine? And we all should be doing this, of being able to say, all right, of all the channels and tactics that are out there, uh, these drive. These are the best ones that drive impressions. These are the best ones that drive engagement. These are the best ones to drive web referral. But which one has a higher propensity to
Exactly.
to once I drive to the website, to be stickier, to go 4 clicks versus 2 clicks, to actually get in and touch pipeline and drive pipeline, and being able to put that into a model, whether we use automation or AI or whatever it is. So it's really taking today's technology and putting it into this conversational strategy, and this content strategy. That I think is one of the most interesting things to me. The other thing is video. How do you solve for really using video that doesn't drive people to the dead end of YouTube? I mean, really, and that YouTube ends up being not a dead end in a bad way, but it really is like a content cul-de-sac.
Hmm.
You drive people to this site, and the clicks that come out of YouTube are not optimal. So it ends up being a really that content cul-de-sac. I get there, I experience the brand, and then I say, oh, well, that's nice. Now where do I go? No one's really necessarily has cornered the market on being able to take someone from YouTube to .com. It just sort of dead ends there. And using video and looking at video in a way that, hey, it's a three-part model, more or less. It's our YouTube experience, it's a .com experience, or an embedding experience, and then it's a how I deliver this on social media. And there's video, but every execution of those videos are different. So how do we get our head around using video to increase the community, awareness, start more conversations, and then drive that brand consideration? I think that's going to be one of the big trends in 2020 and beyond.
How, as a B2B marketer, are you looking at new channels, specifically TikTok? Now, not necessarily the company you work for today, but your best practice hat on. If this has nothing to do with B2B in the MarTech space, do people need to even be wasting time thinking about TikTok, even though that younger demographic that you may be looking for 10 years down the road, is potentially going to be a buyer of product? How do you look at TikTok today?
So you look at something like TikTok or any other content platform that will come and that will go. And there's two ways to look at it. One is, and there's two enormous opportunities. One I can practice in that space to get the message across to tomorrow's buyer, but people engaging with TikTok are also today's buyer. They're not our buyer, but they're our customer's customer. So when you're in the tech space and when you're in the B2B space, this customer's customer play is I believe a phenomenal opportunity. So if you're able to show how your automation or your software or your AI solutions or your cloud solutions really help the customer's customer by telling that story on that platform about these people in that platform, I think that's a home run. Now, again, you have a dollar to spend. Where are you going to spend your dollar?
Hmm.
And are you going to spend it on a demand gen campaign, or are you going to spend it on a branding campaign that shows how your particular B2B product can help your client's customer? And that's certainly a way to tug on the emotional buying strings, but really dimensionalize it in a way that says, oh, these guys can do that. Look at how they're positioning that particular story on a platform in a way that really gets me to look at my customer base differently, showing how this one customer can actually solve my needs and really help me realize my opportunities.
So let's shift in and talk about building community. I mean, you have worked with a lot of brands that have millions of followers. And how do you, especially in the B2B space, look at building that community? Because it's obviously a different play on Facebook with a B2B brand rather than a B2C brand.
It is. So it goes back to defining each of the channels that you have with a role responsibility. So Facebook and Instagram is likely for the most part is more of a humanizing play. I know there are brands where, and it escapes me, but I just read an example where one B2B or tech brand has decided to go all out on Instagram, posting 50 times a day, give or take a few. Now, I mean, obviously they're hitting the customer, they're telling the story with the customer's customer, but they're reinventing the way that they're telling their story to get to another audience. Now, obviously, they change the role and responsibility of what that particular channel uh, is going to do. But it goes back to the core. Instagram's going to do this. Facebook is going to do that. LinkedIn's going to do this. Twitter's going to do that. And then once those roles and responsibilities are established, then it's just feeding the machine with the right content. That's the only reason people are going to follow you. They may follow you because of a paid campaign. Hey, I should follow this particular tech company. They will drop off or not engage if you're not telling a story that is helpful, that is engaging, that just supports supports a customer in a certain way. It's really that customer centric content. That's how you build the community size.
Sure. Well, you and I discussed this, I don't know, like a month or so ago when we last spoke, but we were talking a little bit about social channels, and there are a lot of people today who don't want people to sell anything to anybody with any kind of social ads, and I get that because we as consumers of social media don't wake up, we don't run to see what our favorite brand is doing or preaching or selling or not selling. But how do you look at social, at least as part of helping drive growth? I mean, real growth with revenue attached. What's the mentality you share and how you look at social channels and selling?
Right. At the end of the day, whoever we work for pay us to help drive sales, but we all need to do it a little differently. Email is a great direct mail tactic, or I'm sorry, a great direct marketing tactic. Telemarketing companies that follow up on marketing or sales qualified leads are a great way to help drive the revenue. The job of social, there's an interesting statistic I just saw. I think it was from marketing charts. I'd have to double check that, but it was it's broke out channels of the role of responsibility that they have, meaning you're tying it to revenue, but it's social is best spent not so much on the demand gen part of the funnel, but really on the upper funnel, telling and explaining and helping. And the way that you drive that ROI and connect it to sales, because it's all connected to sales. When I was with one company, we were able to tie social media all the way through the pipeline. So by clicks and coding and things like that, we were able to track a tweet all the way through the pipeline and demand generation to say, oh, this particular tactic touched pipe, so therefore it must have had something to it, because we bought into the whole idea of multi-point attribution, multi-touch attribution. But simply, and I think that's where we succeed, because where everyone can succeed, because the business is just moving at the speed of light, is um, if you teach the people, I use another metaphor, if you teach the people how to fish, they'll figure out that you're selling fishing poles. And by the instruction, by the research, by the trends, by the questions people should be asking, they'll say, "Wow, this group really knows, this particular company knows what they're doing." And that's what B2B and tech companies should be doing, is explaining, hey, this is how we can help you. This is how we can help you use digital. This is how we can help you use AI, whatever it is, to drive your bottom line. But it's not as if we're going to put something on sale like it's the Gap and say, hey, we have AI, hey, we have automation for sale. Not how it works. But hey, these are the 5 things you need to be thinking about automation if you're in the banking industry, let's say. Or these are 5 things that we've seen that worked in the industry, or these are the 5 trends in 2020. And well, so you start to get people to think, wow, I'm going to help shape their point of view, show them the questions that they should be asking, help them frame the questions, that will help them drive their bottom line. With that, you've taught, you've enabled, you've helped, you've educated. Now they realize, oh, this company must be selling automation. They must be selling AI, or whatever a digital solution might be, or software solution might be. And then there's a reason to have a conversation. And so you go from that, impressions and driving awareness among a community, to really putting out this content that will help start a conversation, and then driving consideration by that one-to-one conversation, or going to the website. But I think it's, as complex as that sounds, it's pretty. I mean, it's a pretty simple way to explain it.
Sure. How important is influencer marketing to you on social channels in the B2B space? I mean, I get asked this all the time whenever I present, about influencer marketing at different conferences, and I talk a lot about how you can use it as part of your lead gen strategy as well. But I always get a question following up, what about B2B? So curious how you look at that and how you engage it on your social channels.
Yeah, influencer marketing is a funny thing. There's a lot of conversation recently. Does it work? How do you define someone? What sort of rules and restrictions can you put around? What are the quid pro quos? Yeah, I've spoken with many agencies and many marketers that are out there, and the conversation invariably goes to influencers. Well, how do you find them? Who are they? All right,
Mm-hmm.
so we're going to find 10 influencers and we're going to ask them to do this for us. It's like, well, what's the quid pro quo? You know, what are you going to give them? And because you can't put too many, it might be an interview with an executive, it might be access to information before it hits the general public for a different point of view on something. They're all different things. Just giving money, is probably not the best thing. So what you have to realize is that there's a lot of quid pro quos, and to really make an influencer relationship work, you can't put too many restrictions. So to me, you put the brand, or you put a brand at potential risk, where you are really banking on an influencer, um, to do things a certain way. What influencers do, obviously, is give you access to an audience that you can't tap right now. Now, another way to look at influencers, I think, is an awesome first step for a lot of brands. And I know, when I worked at SAP, we did this really well with the mentors. Is develop in-house influencers.
Amen.
If you can develop that in-house influencer and let he or she be your rock star in your particular market, geo market, industry, practice, whatever it is, and you help that person take that point of view, shape it in a way that is very palatable for the external audience, and then you get the press pickups, and then you get the interviews, and then you get the podcasts. That ends up, that person becomes your own homegrown influencer, which I think is a lot more powerful than hiring someone that has a million followers that really doesn't care about you, that just wants something back from you.
Yeah, coming from the guy that's got 100,000 plus followers, so you would know.
Well, thank you for the invite, Shark.
Well, so what is the biggest lesson you've learned? Biggest mistake as well, but what's the most difficult thing you've learned as a B2B marketer that is sort of challenging to you every day, especially as to how social channels interact for brands in the B2B space?
It's how to collaboratively build a story or tell a story. And when you work within larger organizations, and I mean, it's obviously all about matrixed relationships
Mm-hmm.
and leading the way. And in businesses and brands with a lot of leaders and a lot of opinions and points of view, it's being able to find a simple way to tell a story or to make a point, because we all bring superpowers to the to the situation, and it's being able to really develop that one superpower that it combines collaboration with expert skills, and being able to actually get something done. Within, as you can imagine, as you get working with larger organizations, at times it is hard to collaborate. It is hard to get things done. It is hard to drive measurable results that isn't is aren't very fuzzy, and it's just full of, well, did that really work, or what were we trying to do? It's being able to actually get something done in a collaborative way.
Yeah, it's amen to that because every time I've seen it as well, every time you add a layer as companies get bigger, it's so hard to keep that message aligned. And it's not a fault of the people that care, but it just is what it is. How do you think marketers should justify what they're doing on social today with so much of the ROI focus being shifted. I think a lot of people right now are just in fear that the economy will turn, and a lot of the content teams are being scrutinized a lot differently. But how do you see sort of the justification of where we use social to really build and engage and drive what is ultimately revenue growth for a company?
Again, it's the right role for the right tool. You and flip it upside down. You could say, well, where would you be if you didn't have it? What would the impact on the brand be? What would the impact on SEO be?
Mm-hmm.
What would the impact on your internal influencers be? What would the impact on leadership be? How are you going to get the message out
Yeah.
to, if you're, especially if you're a B2B or a tech company, you're not in the social space. Why aren't you on social media
Yeah.
practicing what you preach?
How do you have a basic
And
conversation with a customer?
right, exactly. If no one, if a client isn't answering emails anymore, what's the most effective way to insinuate your way into that person's ecosystem without being intrusive? While at the same time showing that you can. And I'm talking about social selling, showing that you know what you're speaking about and that you can help, not by telling, but by showing, and it becomes the ultimate storytelling tool. Now, as more and more people are looking to spend more on content, you're having a larger collection of bad content that's out there. So how do you show leadership, and how do you show your particular company and your leaders that this actually makes a difference? Then it goes back to the simple metrics of being able to relate and connect the dots of reaching a broader community that is a relevant community. I'm helping to start conversations by putting out engaging content. I'm driving comments, and I'm getting back to people. People are sharing, people are liking, and actually we've earned enough trust in our content that we're not selling, but we're educating. People are actually clicking through, and I'm driving 5 to 10% of web referral traffic. If you didn't have social and you were counting on 5 to 10%, and it's probably somewhere closer to 7% web referral coming from social, where's this going to come from? And coming from social is almost as it's up there with search to a certain degree, that it's more natural. I'm seeing it. It's more of an inbound tactic because I'm searching for something as opposed to you throwing up a display ad in front of me, which is absolutely necessary, but it's just a big chunk of the business. No, it's not 50%. Nothing is really 50% that's driving a web referral, except maybe
Exactly.
just typing in the company's URL. So you have to point to that, but you have to elevate the conversation to put it into context. And leaders all over the world and run organizations, that's what they want to know. They want to know the context of what you do and the impact that it has, and it's being able to tell that story. And giving it to the guy in a corner or the kid in the corner, that's a tough story to tell with someone who doesn't have a lot of experience or really understands the landscape and the ecosystem that's out there.
Agreed. So, you've spoken at a ton of conferences as well. As a B2B marketer working with companies that have millions of followers, obviously you're working on learning stuff, learning new stuff all the time with better ways. But what kind of content out there do you hear that really drives you nutty and you just think, I wish people would stop talking about this? Is it the kind of short-term hacks, or is it something else where you're seeing bad advice out there? What kind of advice would you tell people to not listen to today?
You mean B2B marketing advice or
B2B,
social media?
well, a
B2B
little bit
marketing
of
advice.
both probably, but B2B social advice especially.
Gotcha. So the thing that really um, gets under my skin is the content that is based around things that tell a story based on I think versus telling a story based on what I know.
Yeah.
And really what that amounts to be is it an outcome based message that, hey, this is the statistic, this is the piece of research.
Yeah.
When I was a more active blogger, there was never a blog that I put out there that wasn't based on 2 to 3 pieces of external research that my point of view provided context around that, and there was a takeaway point.
Yeah.
and it's the fluffy stop by my booth. Hey, I think you should visit our website. Hey, we have more. Download this report because we think it's good. That's the stuff that doesn't work, and that absolutely irks me. And I think what that really leads right into the other thing is the checklist strategy. Hey, I've done this particular tweet, this particular blog post. I've done my social strategy. Check on to the next thing. And I think brands and companies, whether you're big or small, are doing themselves a disservice by doing that checklist strategy of just getting it off and saying I do social, and you find out that's not working because you're not able to look under the hood. And that's really the other thing, is that is a lot of people that say do this and this, but really not understand how to open up that hood to see what's working and what's not working, and really being able to connect the dots there to make that engine work a little bit harder for you.
Agreed. Well, Jerry, you're on a shark's perspective, so I have to ask, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Now that took me from I'll take that bait, if you will. Uh, what is my favorite kind of shark? My favorite shark is the land shark from SNL back in the 70s.
Nice.
So there
Dan
you go.
Aykroyd reference. It's perfect.
Yes.
Well, Jerry, it's that special time in the show, and that's a first. I haven't heard that one before, so that's kudos to you. Well, Jerry, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Sure. If they're coming from you, absolutely sure.
All right, here we go. Number 1, YouTube or TikTok?
YouTube.
All right, number 2. Well, I'm going to ask some Philadelphia questions since that's where you're based as well. Rocky 1 or Rocky 3?
Oh, Rocky 1. I cannot watch Rocky 1 without crying at the end.
Really?
Absolutely.
I like Clubber Lang. He made me cry as well. So, number 3, shares of a social post or comments on a post?
Comments, because the goal of social is to start a communication, and if someone comments, it gives you the opportunity to engage back.
Amen. All right, number 4, another Philly question. It's an odd one to ask too. Even I know it. The Liberty Bell or the Philly cheesesteak?
The Philly cheesesteak.
And why so?
Well, I've
It's kind of hard
here
to
all
even
my
come
life.
up with an answer for that. But
Yeah, I've seen the Liberty Bell once or twice. It just
exactly.
it is. There's bigger lines at the Liberty Bell. Put it that way.
Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, biscuits with sausage gravy on it.
Nice. Good man. So, Jerry, where can people find out more about you, follow you on social channels, and learn about what you're doing and more?
Yeah. So thanks for the plug there. Follow me at Jerry Moran, GerryMoran on Twitter as well as Insta. Insta's more of a craft beer focus.
Yeah.
Feed, and then follow me on reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to be part of your community, and you can always reach out to me at moran.gerry@gmail. So thank you for the opportunity, Shark. It was
awesome.
It was
Thank
a pleasure.
you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. So there was my conversation with Jerry Moran, the Global Head of Social Media Strategy at Cognizant, and he's a B2B influencer with a career of helping people and technology brands increase their awareness and improve their bottom line with social media, digital, and content marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, love how he described having a clear role and responsibility for each channel. He used an analogy of members on a basketball team and how each plays a certain role. For him, it's accurately defining the roles and responsibilities along the way. And I love that because we set up certain goals and expectations, but testing the content, for example, on the way is not what enough marketers do. Many set up expectations and then make judgments at the end. Funnels for a buyer are somewhat fluid, and unless you have the exact formula of what fits in the exact order that the customer wants or needs, then you'll first need to understand the role of the channel and then learn how to feed or optimize that along the way. Don't measure channels as much as you should measure your content on those channels and how it helps them get what they want and ultimately helps you make the conversion you're seeking. Second, winning teams find success when having focus. One of the most important things that I believe, whether you centralize the team or not, with who handles what on any and all social channels, content, etc., is that you must centralize that message. That control allows you to prevent a mixed or confused message being dispersed across channels and teams and eventually to your customers. You'll get a lot of people in any organization want to contribute, raise their voice, add to the messaging, etc. But I love his example of the conductor leading the orchestra. The music notes could be the same, but presented much differently, and that often delineates the message that your brand wants to convey in a certain way. I say it all the time, the confused buyer says no, so don't confuse them and don't let your internal teams or external agencies add to that confusion if you can prevent it. Third, love how he looks at how you measure your own performance on social with what is catching attention. He describes not judging shares and likes only, which isn't the best way to measure performance. If people are clicking through on a post to your site at a greater clip than liking or sharing, and those click-throughs convert to leads and or sales, then many marketers might judge clicks and shares as a main metric, but those are vanity metrics and not ones that help your business grow. I just see this way too often still. Just remember to serve content that helps people solve problems and helps them get to where they want to go to solve that problem. Don't just count vanity metrics. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Go out there and be social. Maybe not a social butterfly, but at least a social shark anyway. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.